Morning, everybody. You all awake? Are you a Hindu, you, or are you, a Hindu? To prepare for this sermon, the question I asked myself was, am I a Hindu, you? Or when did I become a you? I remember that I signed the UU Westport membership book about 20 years ago. That was when I became a member of this congregation. But when did I realize that I was a Unitarian? Perhaps it was when I came here and heard Frank Hall preach from this pulpit for the first time. But I think it was when I went downstairs to the children's chapel and I saw the images of different religions that were put together by the kids of this congregation. I thought this would be a great program for my children to be exposed to different religions and provide them for a life of service, love, reverence, and tolerance. Then I asked the question on the other side of the coin, when did I become a Hindu? Was it the moment I was born into this world, kicking and screaming? At that time, I was not conscious of any religious tenets or creeds. Perhaps it was when I could consciously understand these kinds of concepts. If I have to wait till I really understand what Hinduism is about, I think I'll have to wait for a long, long, long time. What does it mean to be a Hindu? And where did I learn what or who is a Hindu? Perhaps we can start with a question I asked the children in the RD program. What gods do Hindus believe in? How many gods do Hindus believe in? And the answers vary. For the little kids, they say 1, none, 10, there's as many fingers as they can raise probably. Thousands, which is, next biggest number. So let me ask you the same question. Let's maybe do a little show of hands. So how many gods, how many people think it's one God? 4 people. Quiet. How about 3? 3. No takers. Many hands. 300 million? Infinite? So the correct response, of course, is that it depends on which Hindu you ask. So let me quote you from one source of all knowledge, right? The internet. So the Hindu man of Yahoo Answers states that asking how many Hindu gods are there is like asking how many different shapes of water are there. Water itself takes on the shape of any container that you put it in. And it's exactly the same with Hinduism. There is one universal God known as Brahman or Paramatman. All others are some manifestations of this supreme God. But as I said, it depends on whom you ask. Other Hindus will come up with their own answer. So this question is a construct that arises from usually other monotheistic religions. These religions are evolved from a philosophy that claims that there is one God, and that the one God in which they believe is the true God. But, let me share with you how I, growing up as a Hindu, might respond to that same question. Who is your God? What do you believe in? With an answer that is probably closer to a traditional Unitarian concept. It is not whether there is one God, but that God is one. And God is of many forms. In the purest form, God is formless, shapeless, neither a he or a she, and exists in the form of primordial energy. Some Hindus refer to this energy as Adi Parashakti, divine energy beyond the universe. In this manifestation, Adi Parashakti is sometimes thought of as a female goddess. I grew up thinking that God was beyond gender or sex. if you hold on to this belief that this energy transcends form and identity, it forces you to not discriminate on the basis of sex, gender, race. Not in religion, not in your daily life. I might have also said that since God is infinite, no one can truly comprehend God, given the fallacies of the human mind. Therefore, God is imagined by human beings in many forms. God takes on the forms of water, wind, thunder, lightning. There is nothing that God is not. The Upanishad, one of the oldest books of Hinduism, says, "Thou art woman, thou art man. Thou art the dark blue bee and the green parrot with the red eyes. Thou hast lightning as thy child, thou art the seasons and the seas." Another way that I thought about Hinduism when I was growing up is to imagine God as being timeless, endless. This moved me to visualize the universe itself as an endless object of reincarnation. That there is a big bang creation of the universe, but this universe will eventually die, and a new universe will be reborn, and so on. In that vision, God is imagined as a trinity of sorts. Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver, and Shiva, the god of destruction and rebirth. For it must surely follow as the night the day, that there is an endless cycle of birth, life, death, and rebirth of the soul. I'll come back to the soul in a little bit. In other words, Hinduism begins with this vast universe of multiple entities which are one with God, which is how I envision the seventh principle of Unitarian Universalism. Respect for the interdependent web of all existence. Walt Whitman describes this ethos well, as he says in his poem, "For You." "The sum of all reverence I add up in you, whoever you are. All music is what awakes from you when you are reminded by instruments. The sun and the stars that float in the open air, the apple-shaped earth, and we upon it. It is for you, whoever you are. It is no further from you than your hearing and sight are from you. It is hinted by the nearest, the commonest, the readiest." The point, though, is that if you ask any Hindu, you will probably get a different answer to these questions of how many gods, who's your personal belief in God, or whether indeed, is there a God? As the Gita says, "Whosoever comes to me, through whatsoever form I reach, all are struggling through paths which in the end lead to me." So the second belief of Hinduism that I grew up with is the belief that it is up to me to create my own path and search for the truth and meaning. Sounds familiar? A free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Sounds like the fourth principle of Unitarianism. So in Hinduism, while you have the freedom to follow your own path or build your own theology, as it were, there are some established paths to achieve this salvation. The four traditional or well-defined paths are the path of duties, the devoted discharge of ritual and social obligations, the karma marga. Another one is the jnana marga, the path of knowledge, the use of meditation, concentration, and contemplative learning. This form also includes yoga, not as an exercise, but as a way of thinking. The third is the bhakti marga, the path of devotion to a personal God. And the fourth is the raja marga, the king of margas, is the path of penance and austerities. In India, you might see many people following the bhakti marga, devotion to a personal God, with prayers and chanting and going into personal ecstasy to be one with God. Some of you might be familiar with the Hare Krishna movement, for example, that became popular in the US in the 70s. That is sort of one extreme manifestation of this path. Most Hindus try to follow the karma marga, the path of diligently executing your duties. Your duties in this world as a son, as a daughter, as a father, as a provider. You don these robes constantly and live your life diligently. I grew up in a house where my mother probably would be thought of as following the path of karma. She grew up in the Brahmo Samaj tradition. The Brahmo Samaj was a reform movement in Hinduism that began around 1830, about 200 years ago, and does not discriminate between caste, creed, or religion, and was self-defined as an assembly for the religious and devout adoration of the nameless, unsearchable, eternal, immutable being, who is the author and preserver of the universe. My mother had this uncanny ability to find the good in every person. Whenever I was judgmental, arrogant, impatient, or critical, she'd say, put yourself in the other person's shoes. Try to understand what might be driving their behavior. To me, that was the essence of Hindu Dharma. My father, on the other hand, is a vocal atheist. When I say that, people ask me, what does that mean? It means that he's a vocal critic of all organized religion and considers religion to be the bane and vehicle of oppression of people. And that it has and continues to be instrumental in creating wars and dissonance amongst people. So let's look at some of the evidence, right? You look at television, newspapers, blogs on the internet today. What do you see? In the subcontinent, we see religious riots in India or religious jihad in Pakistan. Today's headlines are all about, religious war in the Middle East with ISIS troops, death and destruction in Palestine and Israel. I gave the same sort of talk last year, and I used these same words in 2014. And the sad postscript is that, I could say the same thing next year. And so my father came to the conclusion, after some rigorous thinking, that he does not believe in religions that are the cause of war, or see any value in going into a temple or supporting organized religion that is the cause of all the travails of this world. However, to many of his friends who are very traditional in a spiritual sense, he's a jnana yogi, one who perseveres in the pursuit of knowledge. To them, he's on the path of salvation. So when someone tells me that the third principle of Unitarian Universalism is the acceptance of one another and the encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations, the Hindu says, of course. There's been some discussion recently to stop referring to Hinduism as a religion and replace it with the term Sanatana Dharma. This loosely translates to the natural, eternal, or ever-present way. According to the notion of Sanatana Dharma, the eternal and intrinsic inclination of the living entity, the Atma, or the soul, is to perform seva, or service. Many Hindus take this notion seriously and have dedicated their lives to this notion of working to better the lives of the people around them. You might know some of the Mahatma Gandhi's one sort of well-known example of many. He articulated and extended this concept when he said, a civilization is to be judged by its treatment of minorities. So Gandhi lived his life to serve the underprivileged and to reduce inequities of class and caste in the society around. But, at a more personal level, how do we treat one another? One of my early memories in our house is to draw a kolam on the front porch every morning, a form of painting that is drawn by using rice powder. In the ancient times, kolams were drawn on coarse rice flour so that the ants would not have to walk too far or too long looking for a meal. The rice powder also invited birds and other small creatures to eat it, thus welcoming other beings into one's house. A daily tribute to our harmonious coexistence with the world around us. So Sanatana Dharma is all about service, seva, equity and compassion. What has struck me and continues to strike me on any Sunday that I come here to be with all of you is the notion that love is the spirit of this church and service its law, or by extension the second principle of Hinduism, justice, equity and compassion in human relations. Let me go back to the soul for a minute. Cartoon images from detractors of Hinduism would ask, do you think in your next life you'll come back as a bug, or as a dog, or as a monkey? Usually with the little kids asking those kind of questions. Sounds funny. To me, the concept of the indestructible soul is based on the principle of Atman, that God exists in each and every one of us. When we greet each other, when we first meet, we say, Namaste, honor the light within you. In that statement, it seems obvious that God must exist in all of our fellow human beings. Extending that further, God must also exist in all the plants, in the trees, in the birds, and in the animals, because they're all God's creatures. Thus, Hindus think it is important to treat all creatures with compassion and respect each individual human being as if there is a spark of godliness within each of us. Swami Vivekananda, addressing the World's Parliament of Religions in Chicago in 1893, said, "The Hindu believes that he or she is a spirit. Him, the sword cannot pierce. Her, the fire cannot burn. Him, the water cannot melt. Her, the air cannot dry. In its very essence, it is free, unbounded, holy, pure, and perfect." Emerson, who read the Transcendentalist movement of the mid-19th century, believed that within the deepest level of each individual, there is a soul, there is a unity. This unity is within all of us and in everything in nature. He defines it in his poem, Oversoul. Within us is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty, to which every part and particle is equally related, the eternal one. When it breaks through our intellect, it is genius. When it breaks through our will, it is virtue. When it flows through our affections, it is love. To be a Hindu, I must respect this divine spark within you. To be a UU, spark or no spark, I must respect the inherent worth and dignity of every person. For me, being a Hindu UU is to live these core beliefs, principles, and values. What does it mean for you